What's up, everybody? My name is Greg Brooks. I'm here today with Eli Schwartz, who is a well known, all around, all star SEO, been in the game for a while, hanging out, chilling on the West Coast time.
Yeah,
How's it going, Eli? How are you today?
going well. Thanks for having me, Greg. Really excited to be here. We've been talking about this for all of 2024. I'm glad we finally fit this webinar into 2024.
We have been. While we give everybody a couple minutes to hop in, Eli is also going to get an award for longest time in between started talking about having some sort of a hangout together and then actually being able to have it. We had
What do I
somebody at
get?
your
Wait,
tail.
are you just like going to announce it, or am I going to actually get something? Because I want a trophy for this.
I think what you can get, we'll go offline. We can exchange addresses and we'll send you something in the mail for sure.
Oh God, I thought I was going to get a presentation of a trophy right now. All right.
I have a trophy, but it came from me winning a Super Smash Brothers tournament, and it wouldn't be right to pretend that that's something else than what it is.
Fair enough.
Yeah. I put a lot of time into Dark Samus because my wife's younger brother absolutely destroyed me a bunch of years. We've been together for a very long time, but a bunch of years ago, he beat me in the Nintendo 64 version of the game, and I was like straight outclass. Like every character just whipped my butt. And I was like, never again. So I played the newer version until I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm going to be better than him at this point.
That's pretty funny. That's determination and grit right there.
Yeah, I also think there's I think it's representative of a lot of things, and I think maybe not all of them are positive, but ultimately we do what needs to be done. So you're over on the West Coast. Remind me where specifically. Is it Cali or is it
Yeah,
elsewhere?
yeah. I'm in California. I'm like about a mile from Apple. I'm in Cupertino, right near Google. So pretty much everyone I interact with works for big tech.
Right, exactly. And so do they feel that the sky is falling right now, or where do they, regulatorily speaking?
No, should we dig into this? Because I have so many thoughts on this.
All right, we're gonna do a couple minutes of reg tech, and then we're gonna hop into SEO. Fire away.
Okay, so everyone has these views on like evil Google, and they had that thing like was it like a month or so ago where Google invited small business publishers to Google? You know what I'm talking about?
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
To try to be like, we're sorry and we don't want to hurt you.
Right.
So there's this like, and I wrote about this thing in my book also, where like people think of like Google as evil, maybe, right? But like Google is a 200,000 person entity, and I don't want to tar all Googlers. They're amazing. They're super intelligent. But many of those 200,000 people care very much about making sure that they don't hurt their promotion path
Right.
and that they don't have to fall on a sword for suggesting an idea that doesn't work out, or they don't want to jeopardize the vacation they're about to go on. So again, they're all super smart, but they're not necessarily risk takers. They're working at a large public company that pays them extremely well. And that's true for all large public companies, especially big tech companies that control our world. And when there are those that say, like, well, Google's evil, I think it would take more effort to be evil than anyone wants to expend. I'm sure there are people that are in senior roles and they want to further Google's goals, and they are furthering Google's goals to world domination, but actually enacting all the things that Google gets blamed on, I think is just raw inertia. Like, this is the way the algo works. Figuring out how the algo will, let's say, site reputation abuse, which is, I have a lot of opinions on site reputation abuse, but I think site reputation abuse, for those that aren't aware what that is, that's Google finally saying CNN, Business Insider, WSJ, MSNBC, whatever, all you big media sites, you're not Groupon. You don't get to have couponing sites, and you don't get to like review crypto and all that. But site reputation abuse is a third rail for Google, because if Google attacks, let's say CNN, or let's say the Wall Street Journal's website, in a way that actually annoys CNN and annoys the Wall Street Journal, that someone more than the SEO team who monitors traffic has to say, oh, look, we lost a significant chunk of revenue. Now we have to go through layoffs because of what Google did to us. Well, that is not going to just net an angry tweet. That's going to get an article or two. And an article or two could start a total maelstrom where now everyone is writing articles, not just the sites that have been hit. And guess what happens? The stock goes down. So who at Google wants to do that and say, look, I want to clean up the internet to the point where everyone is hating on us and we all lose collective net worth? That's a big ask. Now, I'm not saying there aren't people at Google that will take that initiative, but probably most people don't want to raise their hand and volunteer that they're going to be the ones that are going to hurt everyone around them's collective net worth. They're going to hurt potentially the economy because Google's a good chunk of the stock market. So there's a lot going on there. And I think Google wants to fix the index, but they don't want to fix the index to the point where SEOs want to, like, you look at search, you do a search for a typical thing, and you're like, okay, strike that, strike that, strike that. This is all terrible. Google, and this is, again, I'm surrounded by Googlers, really smart Googlers who really want to do the right thing. And I ask them questions like, hey, what about all this AI content? And they're like, oh, yeah, this shouldn't be in the index. Will you do anything about it? We want to do something about it. So that's the thing. All the things that we see and we're like, oh, wow, that shouldn't be ranking. Oh, look, this national business should not have a local pack in every single city in the country. They see it too. And they want to do something about it, but they can't necessarily do that without lots and lots of unintended consequences. All right, I'm off my
Ooh, that's
soapbox.
so eloquently spoken, because it speaks to what I think is um a big difference between somebody who's good at SEO and who's great at SEO, or someone who is a manager at a company, or someone who's a really good leader at a company. And it's understanding that deeper layer and incentive structure of what's actually happening. And a lot of times people get bothered or disappointed or angry that something is, quote, supposed to be happening, but it's not. And in reality, there is a specific reason. You don't have to agree with it, but there's a specific reason why it is happening. And so you can either choose, do I want to talk about what should theoretically be the case, or do I want to spend my energy applying what is actually happening?
100%. And it's why I love doing the consulting I do. So I like working with really large late stage companies. I work with startups too and help them structure their SEO strategies. But my favorite is working with large, late stage, complicated companies who can't get out of their own way. And I get to thread that needle to help them get out of their own way, because there's a right thing and then there's the thing that's actually going to happen. So there's a company I'm working with right now, a large global retailer that has presences in multiple countries, and they have product lines in multiple countries, which means they have SEO teams and and websites and SEO strategies, and they're publicly listed in one of the countries that they're in. And the things they ask me to do are absolutely impossible, but they come down from leadership. And what I need to do is I need to translate those requests into things we can actually do and to things that people will actually execute upon. And when I look at like our efforts for this year, which is we increased revenue from search by 40%, which is in the hundreds of millions of dollars range, that's huge, because I'm not looking at, oh, I tweaked a title tag. I'm looking at, I got the product management team who said they absolutely have no bandwidth to do anything, to do something. I'm looking at the engineering team who said, there is no way in hell we're going to do any of these things you ask. We just don't have the resources. We don't have any people. They all left. And we got them to do
Right.
something. And I'm looking at the SEO team who's just jaded. And they've been firing tickets and making requests for the last 3 years and nothing happened. And now they get to look and say, hey, look at all these things happen. Now we're energized. And now there's more things we're going to do because we have this track record. We've earned political capital. And I may be weird that I like these kinds of political efforts and diplomatic efforts within companies, but I love working with companies where 40% equals hundreds of millions of dollars, rather than I work with a startup and like, look, we got 60 pages indexed and we're driving traffic and maybe we got another round of funding, which again, I do also, but I get more excited by these large companies figuring out how to do the thing that probably should be done, but it's done in a weird way because you have so many roadblocks. Like I wrote about this in my book, which is now, this story is 5 or 6 years old, where I worked with a company for about 6 months, the CMO had hired me and we came up with a plan and we pitched it to, and the CEO had hired me too. And this was a company that raised hundreds of millions of dollars. So like they had resources. And when we pitched it to the CPO, chief product officer, and the CTO, the chief technology officer, they're like, we just don't have people. If you want us to do this, we're going to have to drop other things that we want to do. And the CEO was like deer in the headlights and, ultimately like left the room and like the decision was just made. But that was like my eye-opening experience where, hey, I was hired, I was paid, we did all this stuff, and no one ever like allocated the resources. There was a better way to
Right.
do that.
Right.
And ultimately, we had to do something to justify all our efforts that was so much smaller than we wanted. But that's the reality in big companies. There's like competing resources. There's even, this is the worst thing that happens. Again, it's a big challenge, and I kind of like these challenges, is you like work on something for like 9 months, and then you go to pitch it to like that senior executive, and the senior executive is like, oh, I feel like I should let you know, but I just got out of a meeting with my boss and I just let my boss know that I'm leaving. So like,
Right.
boom,
Yeah.
all,
Yeah.
all of
Yeah.
that effort is gone and you have to start all over.
I remember we have a client where we spent about 18 months convincing them of something that would go into your category of this is clear and obvious and should happen. And it took explaining it literally dozens of ways to so many different groups of people. And I think that this is another thing which I'm excited because this is the way this is the route this conversation is going. It's something additional that separates people who are okay and good from people who are truly great. I think this is true for clients and vendor relationships. You're like, can the thing get done? Yes, you know that it can't happen this way, and you have a choice. You can raise your hands and you could say, well, it should have happened, and I said it. If we had just done this, it would have happened. But implementation is part of being a vendor. It's also part of being a leader at a company. Everybody is they have lots of stuff on their plate. They're busy. They have lots of things that are going on. How can you ensure that what you are doing is the thing that happens when other people also want that to happen for them? And I think that that's really like, to use your politics, like that's the campaigning that takes place to make something like that happen. So I think that's really cool. We have hung out, and this is, I think, one of the signs of just your level of understanding of things. We've hung out in an area that's more zoomed out than most SEOs who we have conversations with on this podcast hang out with. They want to go right into the specifics. And the reality is, you need to be doing it both ways. You need to be able to start zoomed out, and then you need to have the expertise to go and zoom in, because otherwise you can only communicate with one side of the table. You can only communicate with the technical folks, or you can only communicate with the non-technical folks. And you need to actually, to be great, you need to do both.
Yeah. And for everyone who's watching, listening, you make way more money by talking to non-technical folks. And
Yeah.
if you can, and this is when I consult for companies, I don't like when they have an SEO manager, because I know SEO. I mean, obviously, I earn money off of SEO, but I don't want to profess to be the smartest SEO in the room. A lot of times when there's an in-house SEO employee, they feel threatened and they need to be the smartest SEO in the room. And if you are trying to impress that person, you're competing with that person for consulting budget. I mean, if it's a job, if you're trying to get the job like next to that person, you're also competing with them, because maybe you'll be smarter, maybe there'll be a layoff and you'll get retained and they won't get retained. But when you're at an executive level and you're not talking about canonicals, you're not talking about 404s, but you're talking about revenue created, buyer journeys, that's where there's more money to be made. Well, again, whether you're consulting or whether it's a full-time job.
100%. And so, and it's because the reality is more people speak that language. Fewer
Yes. Yeah.
people speak the super zoomed in technical version of what it is that you're talking about.
Oh, I mean, I'll just say it. Most people actually don't speak that other language either. I'm
Right.
working on a new
Okay,
book,
fair.
which my new book will hopefully come out next year. So I'm working with Wiley to publish a book called Avatar
Okay.
Quest, which is the idea of understanding who your ideal customer is. And the reason I'm writing this book is because I've been doing consulting for 6 years, and very rarely have I met a company that knows what their customer looks like unless unless they are a sales-led company.
Right.
Sales-led companies, salespeople don't waste time with non-buyers. They know exactly what their buyer looks like, and it doesn't matter what their boss tells them. Their boss may say, We sell to CIOs, and that salesperson knows that they sell to, like, angry engineers. And that is who they're going to reach out to. They're going to sell to angry engineers. And I find it so often when I talk to companies, they don't know who their buyer is. And the reason that I care so much is because they're approaching me about doing SEO. And I try to understand, how does SEO work in their buyer's journey? And they can't articulate it. And it goes higher than not being able to articulate who their buyer is in the SEO journey, but it's not even be able to articulate who their buyer is in general. So there was a company I was talking to. They were a SaaS service company, and they had all these great logos on their website, really like big Fortune 50 companies. So I said, how did you get Salesforce as a client? Like, and they said, oh, that was my CEO's cousin. And then like, oh, how did you get Coke as a client? Oh, that was my past employer. So we went through all of their logos, and not a single one of their logo came from any digital marketing. So then I said, well, why don't you invest in more cousins? Why don't you invest
Right.
in your past, your employees' past employers? So understanding that buyer journey, like, yes, digital marketing worked for them. They spent money, they got business, but the bulk of their business, the logos they were the most proud of, the logos they had for 10 years, all came from somewhere else. So that's where they should go. And when we went through that, then they're like, oh, and I'm like, why do these logos come to you? Is it just straight up nepotism? Are your prices better? And that speaks to, again, all those higher level questions that go well beyond like, oh, well, this is, how would we get, what would an executive at Coke be searching for on Google? Probably not searching at all. Right. So like
Right. Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
that's why I want to write this book, to really dig into it. Like, I've met small businesses who failed. Many small businesses fail. There's a lot of reasons they fail, but one reason that a small business will always fail is if they don't identify their customer. So if you make a gluten-free bakery and you put your bakery in a place where no one cares about gluten-free, it's going to be very hard to stay in business. If you make a hair salon in a place where no one goes to get their haircut because it's a commuter place, or it's a place where everyone only lives, but they commute somewhere else and they get their haircut somewhere else. Doesn't matter how good you are unless you can get people to commute to your salon. So it's all of these things, whether it's small business or big business. And I start digging into it, and I'm like, well, there's a book here. I'd really want to dig into like these frameworks of who are our customers and who are people. So yes, I've veered way off of SEO, but SEO should only be done and when it's a part of a buyer's journey. And my disagreement there with you was that many executives actually don't understand that buyer's journey because they're really not they're not thinking about it. They're looking at their own feedback loop of like, hey, we sold to someone, there must be more customers like this. Oh, we sold to this
Right.
person, they'll stick around. And
Right.
only when that customer churns, or only when like growth slows down, do they start wondering like, was this the right place to be?
It's so true, and it's well said, because ultimately, these are questions that can be asked during the SEO profiling, onboarding, sales process, whatever it is. And the reality is, they it gives a prospective customer or client the clarity that this is appropriate or that it's not appropriate. You do something and it's not appropriate for someone, it's a waste of your time. Okay, sure, you really need the money. Okay, that's one thing. Once that stops being the case, it's actually really costly for you to go and do that, because you're restarting from zero and you're spending all this time during sales and outreach and all that stuff. The flip side is, if you can ask clarifying questions and bring the reality to a prospective client or customer that, oh, this is appropriate for me, and this is the reason why it's appropriate for me, and you're the person who's asking the questions that are enabling me to come to this conclusion, you are different than every single other person who that prospect has spoken to, and you get first shot right then and there. And oftentimes it's the only shot that is it, you just get it. And so this is very much part of SEO. I think SEO is becoming more holistic than it's ever been. And I imagine over time it'll continue to do so. And you've talked about that for years. Product-led SEO is a holistic approach to your why, and it's about like, okay, let that speak to, that's a high level thing, and then let's let that percolate throughout everything that we do. So maybe you want to either talk about that, or you want to talk about how you see the holistic nature of SEO transitioning and as we enter this kind of like 2025 new year.
Yeah, so I'll push back on like SEO becoming more holistic. SEO should become more holistic. I actually think that we've taken 3 steps back right now with AI. So what product SEO really is is an idea of understanding who the user is and this buyer journey is, and making the SEO approach, the SEO asset, a part of that product. So the examples I used in my book are Zillow. So Zillow and Amazon, and I'll explain both of those. So Zillow is, they have a listing page, or a page for every single address in America. I think they're only in America for now. And the only way that you're going to find each of those pages, which are rich pages, are either by searching on Zillow's homepage, we're navigating to it from Zillow's homepage, or Google. So it's the asset, it's the SEO asset that's built for that SEO journey, which is, I want to know how much my house costs. I want to know how much my neighbor's house costs. I want to know how much this house I want to buy, how many bedrooms it has, and what's it been assessed at, and what's it been sold at before, what school district is it in. Those are all SEO questions, and it's not being answered with a piece of content targeted at that keyword. It's a product. It's built for that. The other example, which I really love, is Amazon. So Amazon, when Amazon was conceived, and I think Amazon's like, I want to say like more than 30 years old, right? It's
Yeah.
older than Google. So when Amazon was conceived, there was no iPhone. There was certainly no iPhone case, and there was no USB-C charger. How is it that Amazon can rank in 2024, and definitely in 2025, and probably in 2026, on iPhone case? Because they built SEO into the product. So when they architected their entire site, it wasn't like, oh, we're going to look forward 30 years and we're going to know there's this phone and it's going to need a case and it's going to need silicon or whatever. Let's optimize for these keywords and let's put in the title tag. They created an architecture around SEO that built out the URL structure, that built out the page layout, that incorporated all these assets, and they continued to iterate on top of that. So as we, progress into more rich media where video on a page becomes important, they can feature video. So it's not a stagnant page. So this might seem like a no-brainer, but it is absolutely not a no-brainer, because you look at who Amazon left in the dust. So Walmart, obviously a very large retailer that sells many of the same things Amazon does not rank ahead of Amazon, even though Walmart's website was potentially first. And the reason why is because Walmart focused on those other aspects of SEO, which is, how do we take a product page and put in as many keywords as possible? How do we extend the title tag rather than really thinking about it as a product? This entire architecture should be an SEO product. And again, many, many other retailers fell to the side. eBay is many years behind Amazon. And this is something I met with a number of eBay people a bunch of years ago. 60 or 70% of all products sold on eBay are not auction products. So they're basically the exact same
Right. Yeah.
third-party things that are sold on Amazon. But yet when you look for like iPhone case or a USB-C charger, you do not find eBay, even though if you were to go to eBay, those exact same things from the same, potentially China, manufacturer are there. All the exact same products are there, but why do they not have SEO visibility? Because SEO wasn't baked into that product the same way that it was baked into Amazon. So when I think about product-led SEO, it's not I'm focusing on a user. It's really I'm focusing on the aspect and the part of the buyer's journey that needs that product for SEO, and I'm building that product, that SEO product, around how that user would search for it, which begs the question, well, what if the user isn't searching? Well, in that case, I probably wouldn't do SEO. Now, we started talking about holistic SEO and the way things need to be. So I wrote this book because
And before you go into that, I'm going to
yes.
lightly push back on your pushback, which
Oh,
is, I think the best
we're pushing in
SEOs
all
will.
directions.
Okay. I think that I agree with you. There's a difference between what should happen and what will happen, but I think the higher level SEOs will understand and make a transition to be even more holistic. And I think that will be the big difference between the two groups.
Agree. Totally agree with that. And what I was going to say was, when I wrote
Got
the
on the same pit, back on the same, back in
back
there.
back on the same page. I was going to say, when I wrote the book, I wrote the book mostly because I was starting consulting practice. I was leaving SurveyMonkey, and I needed a business card. So I had a very thick
Right.
business card of a book. I didn't expect to really sell that many copies. I thought my best distribution source would be me handing it out. And I surprisingly sold way more books than I ever thought. And it changed the conversation about how people thought about SEO, which speaks to your point, which is why so many people brought my book. And I love it. And I really appreciate that, like, people cared and they want to do SEO like that. And, I didn't mean to coin the term product led SEO because I didn't think anybody cared, but it did because people cared. Now, my pushback on the pushback on the pushback was
Every pushback. Oh, this is Inception level now.
totally. The executives are not thinking like this. So the executives are asking. So we should be doing holistic SEO. We should be doing product led SEO. But the executives are like, 1 second, all I need is a $20 a month ChatGPT plus subscription, and I can fire my SEO team and my SEO agency. Sign me up. And then
Right.
that's what's happening. So that's where we are in this life cycle
Mm.
stage. Yes, companies like Zillow did fantastic SEO, but whoever's competing with Zillow today is like, wait 1 second, I'm a realtor and I'm based in Texas, and I have all these property listings. What if I got a national footprint by scraping the MLS and then using programmatic SEO, which is not product led SEO, to build out a Zillow competitor for the entire country? And if it's not in Texas where I don't have listings, I'll just farm those out as an affiliate. And if it is in Texas, look at this amazing source for me to get leads for my realty agency. So that's where we are, where executives are looking at programmatic SEO, which is, I've been doing SEO for a really long time. A decade ago, or probably more than a decade ago, we called it it was called spun content. Do you remember that term?
With like SEO nuke and all that good stuff.
Yeah, exactly. So that was that early version of AI SEO, which
Right. It
is
literally, yeah, with the brackets and the pipes, and then yeah, oh yeah.
100%. So now we have AI and it does it for us. But like that concept is as old as SEO was. Like you just
Right.
took content.
Right.
Yep. I mean, there was an earlier version of it, like in the early 2000s, without any AI or programmatic, where you just like, oh, you take a piece of content, you steal a piece of content. I don't even know if Wikipedia existed, but you steal a piece of content from the Britannica Encyclopedia, and then you manually swap in your keywords and you make it
Right.
unique, and then you rank. So now we've gotten to the point where like you don't even have to steal the piece of content. You just have AI write the piece of content. AI stole the content, rewrites the content, you put it in your keyword, you slap it up on your site, and then it looks horrible. So uh, I think that's where we are. And what will happen is we need Google to push back, and Google's starting to push back. When this stops working, it stops being rewarded, then I think we retreat to holistic SEO.
Okay. That's fair. And so you have kind of provided a a a brief overview of where we've landed, which is you have executives who are basically, if we look things on the most macro level, people have a little bit of PTSD from 2022, 2023 around safety of their company. They're looking to cut costs more than they are looking to grow. AI has intersected with companies in a way where people now feel that there could be fewer people at a company, or at least the growth rates in the future. So all roads lead to, hey, how do a bunch of 60 or 70-year-olds being like, how do we AIify this? And so then, that gets pushed down different organizations, shareholder calls, whatever. That leads us to where we kind of are right now in the space, which is programmatic SEO. So you talked about a couple of the names that from your, which foreshadowing what you think of it based off of earlier iterations of it. Why the rage? Well, we know why the rage, because it's a way that people can quote get scale and
And
automatic
cheap, very
and
cheap.
very cheap, and also has been blessed because you go onto the internet or you go onto TV and everybody's talking about all the amazing things that AI can do and how it can create content. And therefore, if I also do that, I'm just part of this thing that's happening. So I think people have permission to do it. How do you look at programmatic, and what are you doing when people are like, "Hey, Eli, we have this great idea." How do you have that conversation?
So I never win that conversation. Because I'm more expensive than the $20 chat GPT subscription. So what I think will happen, and this is why I have these buyer journey conversations, what everyone is forgetting in their rush to like do SEO as cheap as possible. And this existed before ChatGPT. People were doing it with Fiverr. You can buy a piece of SEO content for
Right.
$5,
Right.
or you spun content. It all existed before. What I think is being missed from this entire conversation is the user. So if you flip back to any of these CEOs and say, hey, um, you know, Mr. or Miss CEO, if you knew that a website you were shopping from was full of AI descriptions, would you buy? And they'd be like, no, hell no. So
Right.
they're not sitting in the buyer's seat. They're looking at like, oh, look, this magical way that we're getting traffic. And this is all going to skyrocket our efforts, and look how amazing it's going to be. And I think that that's where we'll end up landing, which is users will reject it, and then Google will be forced to do something about it. And what Google will be forced to do will be so much more brutal than anyone would imagine. And what I think, should we call out names? Let's call out names. NerdWallet. NerdWallet, which recently let go a number of their SEO team members. So they're going to say, NerdWallet, you were good. Everyone loved you. But then, and I have no idea that they would ever, they're doing this, but I'm just pretending that they could fall into this trap. So NerdWallet, if you're listening, don't do it. So NerdWallet, you were awesome. You had really good, human written content. You fell into that trap. But, when you shrunk your SEO team and used AI content, unfortunately, now you're 99% AI. So you offer
Right.
no value. So we're not really going to not nuke your website because that remaining 1%, which there's precedent for, and which is where I learned a lot of SEO and technical SEO from, is Panda. So when Panda happened in, was it 2010 or 11? When Panda happened, Google didn't say, oh, you're mostly good, we're just going to kill your bad stuff. They nuked entire websites. Oh, like
Right.
the company I was working for, we lost 60% of our traffic in one morning. So there's precedent for that. And I think Google will be really cautious about it, but they're going to do it because there's going to be so much pushback from users, where users, again, we're picking on NerdWallet. We have no idea whether NerdWallet's going to actually do this, where users are going to be like, oh, I was looking for a new credit card, and every single one of the results was like this garbage AI content promoted by garbage AI links. And I just want to, get a real opinion. And maybe that real opinion comes from the bank's actual website. It comes from Chase. It comes from Bank of America. It comes from Wells Fargo. Or maybe the correct information we're looking for goes back to, there's in the financial space, there's some really great blogs. So maybe it goes back to those bloggers who are not actually businesses, who would never stoop to having AI content because they want to have their voice and they want to have their opinions and they give their real view, but they've been overshadowed by those sites promoting AI. So maybe that's what happens. Whatever it is, I think we'll get to a point, and we're not at the point yet, where Google users are going to be doing searches and it's all going to be AI nonsense. And then Google is going to have to do something dramatic. And I'll tell you, one of the first places I think this will happen is in Google Images, which is something that most SEOs don't pay attention to. So within Google Images, what the Google Images product is it is Google, it's the Google bot crawls the internet and extracts images that are used on the internet, and then that's images that you can find, and it uses Googlebot images, and it becomes this image curations, image aggregator, which many people don't understand how and what shows and ranks for it, but it provides a lot of traffic. Now, what if that becomes Googlebot, Google Image Bot crawls all these websites that are just AI images. So they're not images that are actually being used anywhere on the internet. They just become these huge libraries of stock image photos. And Google's going to have to do something about it. And that's where I think Google's going to say, oh, this website, this AI stock image site, we're not penalizing some of your images. You are no longer showing up in Google Images at all. And then Google
Right.
Images will have to go back to that point where it is today, hopefully is today, which is images actually used on credible websites rather than any of these stock images site. So if you want to write an article and you want to use an AI driven image and it's part of your article, then yes, that image might make sense. If I look for like, I don't know, dog and cat having a sword fight, if you had an article that dog and cat having a sword fight, great. But if you are a stock image site and you generated thousands of dog and cat fighting, having sword fight, and then you get crawled in Google Images, that would not be the correct way that, users would want Google Images to work. But if you think about that's what's happening with Google Images today, that's what's going to happen with Google Search very soon.
Right. No, that totally makes sense. So you're saying don't go forwards, go backwards, go to the website, and then say what is relevant to appear image wise on here. That's really interesting. I have to ask you, like, where's the line? So, we've had conversations about both images. Let's twist it back to written content. Where's the line of AI inside there? Are we advocating for zero AI involvement whatsoever? And then obviously the other side is 100% written, not looked at by a human being.
Yeah, again, we're going to keep the user hat on here. So will in 10 years from now, will humans go to movie theaters and watch AI written movies with AI imagery and AI cinematography? Potentially.
Right. Yeah.
But the person the team that creates that movie will be extremely skilled and creative, and they will have used AI to produce that piece of creativity. Will users scroll through their Instagram feed that's all fake AI images? No, Instagram will die, right? So AI is a creation tool, is a tool. It's not an output tool itself. And I've talked to a bunch of companies in the AI space who look at like AI as this like secret silver bullet that they're going to use to get a ton of SEO traffic. And what they're doing is they're creating prompts and they just pump out AI content, and they're basically creating AI Wikipedias. Like we could be Wikipedia too. We just like make a bunch of prompts
Right.
and look at all this content. And I think for right now that sort of works, but that can't work in the future, because if I wanted to look something up, why would I go to Google to then click on that result that came out of your AI prompt? I could just make my own AI prompt and get my own AI answer. So again, we're not at the point where people are doing that yet, and we're not at the point where Google's flooded with that, but that's where I would draw the line. So if you have a unique angle on stuff and like you want to write a book, you can't write a book and expect it to be a bestseller if all you did was AI, prompted out. But if you have an ideas and you say, well, give me examples, and that's something I'm actually using in this new book writing process. I'm writing about understanding who your buyers are. I want examples of companies that dramatically failed when they didn't understand who their buyer is. Well, I could do a bunch of research like I did for my last book and find examples and tell those stories, or I could just go on AI and say, hey, Claude, Gemini, ChatGPT, tell me 3 companies that completely misunderstood who their buyers were and what happened. And then it'll tell me. And then based on that, I can do some follow-up research. So I'm not going to go and publish, let's say, Bud Light as an example of a company that didn't understand who their buyers were. So I'm not going to go publish what gets spit out of AI. I'm going to go do research, and I'm going to try to, because if I'm including my book, I'm going to tell the story. So yes, maybe the idea came from AI. Maybe I'll take a couple sentences if it like really told the story. But as a user, no buyer would buy my book if it was just like AI prompted out. So that's how I draw the line. It's like, what does the user expect? And if it's
Right.
just AI, the user can go directly to the source and do their AI prompting on their own.
Exactly. And I think that it's really been enjoyable to kind of go back and forth with you, because what you're showing and what you're displaying and your thought process behind everything is nuance. And again, that's something that is challenging for people in multiple ways. One way is we get 6 seconds, a few sentences, however many characters Twitter is doing these days. Boom, 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 on to the next. 3 seconds to watch a video. I think executives are being asked to do more with less, kind of like as a trend in general. So they're less open to discernment than they were at some point. And it's really challenging when the answer to so much is legitimately, it depends. However, if you can explain the context of why it depends and in which situation is, going to the left and going to the right and going above and below, then you really get ownership over kind of like the entire conversation.
Yeah, and I have a lot of strong thoughts about the word "it depends." So if we got look back to COVID, one of the reasons that everyone went so crazy was because of "it depends." So
Right.
like, are you going to die? Well, it depends. Right? Do you have comorbidities, or are you young? And there was all this, it depends. And everyone's just like looking to leaders, whether it's political leaders or medical leaders or spiritual leaders, to just give an answer. And that's an extreme example of what happened when there was so much ambiguity. And in SEO, I feel like people like to say it depends because it's easy to say it depends, but that's not what we're being paid for. We're being paid to explain the nuance and make a call, because someone has to
Right.
make the call. So whenever I'm working
Yes.
with a company and they say, well, if I do this, will it work? Well, the answer is it depends. I don't know if Google's going to accept it. I don't know that users will search for it, but I'll make a call. I'll say, based on everything I see, this is what I think will happen. But there is room for me to be wrong, but I'm making a call. And I think it's really important in SEO where every answer is it depends, because we don't know the answers. We don't know how the algorithm will work. And by the way, like, again, I going back to what we started with, where I live around so many people that work for Google and all the other big tech companies. They no longer know the answers anymore. So there was a time years ago where I had Google engineer friends and I would share some of the things that I was learning and seeing, and they were curious. And they were, I was able to figure out what they were curious about because they were able to understand how the algorithm worked. Like if I did a 301 redirect that pointed to a 302 redirect, and they could be like, oh, okay, that sort of makes sense that your test worked out. But I'd say right now, it would be very hard for anyone at Google to say, oh, that's why you got the answer you got from the LLM. They don't know. The computers trained themselves. So we're in like, it depends land times a billion, because like no one knows the answer anymore. Even if you like got access to Google's algorithm, you could not understand it because like it's machine learning. It taught itself.
Right.
So yes, the answer is always it depends, but you're not being paid to answer it depends. It's like, again, going back to COVID, like you walk into a doctor and you're like, I have the sniffles. Am I going to die tomorrow or not? You want the doctor to say you're definitely not going to die. Well, you always know there's a chance you might, right? So just give an answer, be confident, make a call, because someone has to make the call. And if you don't make the call, then you get fired, and the person that gets hired instead will make the call, or you lose trust and political capital.
Yes. And there's a unspoken reality, especially for those who are in agencies. My camera loves this zooming out thing going on right now. There's an unspoken reality for, especially on the agency side, which is you're there sometimes, some percentage of the time, to be cover fire for somebody else. And so you're actually brought in specifically to make the call so that you can be blamed when you don't get the call right. And someone internally, we talked about incentives at the beginning of the conversation, someone's incentives are different. It's not their money. They'd rather pay to have an insurance policy. And all that's okay. That's just part of the game too. And you're not always going to be right. And sometimes it's going to be a death sentence when you are wrong. And that's okay too. And it shouldn't stop. It shouldn't stop you from making the call.
Totally. And I think that SEOs in general, and whether it's agency or in-house, should understand what their role is. Their role is to make that call and maybe to be the default person when the call goes wrong. And if you understand what you're supposed to be doing, then you can embrace it. And I mentioned this a couple of times about how much I love like the corporate diplomacy and the politics. Sometimes I'm being brought in to disagree. Sometimes I'm being brought in to agree. And there's even times where I've been brought in. Again, I love big companies for this. I've been brought in to be paid. So there was a company I was negotiating with, and we were going back and forth about deliverables and timelines. And I suddenly figured out they were trying to spend money before the end of the year. And once I realized that that was their primary goal, was to make sure they had extra money, and they wanted to say they did an SEO project. Nothing I said mattered. So I just we targeted the deliverables and we got it signed. I could have gone back and forth and refused to sign, and then I would have blown it up and I would never have gotten it, because then the year would have gone and they had no more objective anymore. So whatever it is that you're doing, whether you're an agency or a consultant or a freelancer or in-house, you want to understand what your role is. Sometimes, and I meet with companies all the time, they want to hire SEO, but really they want a content manager. But if the SEO person can accept that that's what they're supposed to be doing, instead of constantly fighting against the poor content, their job might go easier, or maybe they should look for another job. But when you have to realize what is expected of you, and swim downstream rather than upstream.
Oh, it's so true. Life lessons with Eli Schwartz, part 6, I want to say, from this conversation.
We've gone all different directions.
Well, I like it. And I feel like the vibe I'm picking up on is that people want to know SEO, 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 and tell me your tactics and all this sort of stuff. And the reality is, these are the tactics. Fewer people understand that these are the tactics. They just live in a different world. And it's a complementary world. And oftentimes it's a superseding world. It's actually more important. It's so important. Our screens can just grow at any time. But the point is
Yeah,
that like the point is that this is the sort of stuff that matters to lots of people, and being able to analyze these things and speak in this language is ultimately what is going to get others to say, wow, this person knows something. There's an old saying, which is people can only inspect what they know. And I had a buddy from a long time ago. We would work on deals together, and we were putting together marketing proposals. This is a long time ago. And I remember he was like, there was like, we were putting together a deck, and he's like, oh, you need a period at the end of this sentence. And I was like, all right, cool. What about like, the actual deck? And he just goes, people will only inspect what they know. So people will only look at, I don't know any of the stuff that you're talking about doing, but I know grammar. And so that's what I'm going to find fault with. And that's the thing that I'm going to poke a hole and be like, oh, I'm not getting a good feeling. And it's like, actually, because you can't say why due to the quote unquote skill. And so you just look at the things that you know what they are.
totally.
What do you think? You know, you, I'm an SEO right now. Let's do a couple scenarios. I'm an SEO and I'm client facing. I have clients, maybe I have a small agency. What's the one thing, and we're going to do this for a couple different groups of SEOs. So I'm a smaller SEO, an agency or agency facing, client facing. What's the one thing that should be on my radar that's probably not? And it could have been, hey, we already talked about it. This is what it is for you.
I'd say that the biggest thing to really focus on is to look forward into the future about what Google could be doing, rather than to think about the hot thing that seems to be working right now. So Google could be removing all these AI sites from the index, and I think they probably will. And it gets frustrating when you look at results and say, hey, look, none of these sites deserve to rank, and I'm going to just do the exact same dirty thing that they're doing. So I think that's the thing that SEO should really focus on. And throughout my career, it's been challenging to, like, at many times see myself get beaten by competitors because the competitors did the wrong thing, and then eventually it rights itself. So I think that's the thing to really look forward into, is like, what's right by the user? What will Google eventually do? And I think that's where they'll go. Let's say when it comes to links, a lot of companies spent a lot of money. I've heard of crazy amounts of money spent on paid links. Should you do paid links or not? I mean, it's unfair that it worked for some people, but if you put your money in the right place into building PR, into building something sustainable, that didn't get nuked at any of the Google updates, but some of those paid links did. So yes, it's frustrating in the near term to see the wrong thing working, but in the long term, the right thing will eventually work.
Yeah, it's interesting. We have a client who every algorithm update, they come to us and they go, this website shouldn't be here. Why are they here? What are they doing that we should be doing? And our response is always the same, which is time will sort that out. We shouldn't be copying something that doesn't make sense just because it happens to be working for right now. There's a lot of fun charts. That's a roller coaster ride up. And then, it comes down on the other side of it. Okay. That is for somebody who's client facing at an agency. What if I'm in-house and I'm an SEO? I think one of the big things that we've talked about is understanding the political landscape and what you're supposed to be doing. I think that's a great um, thing that should be on everybody's minds. If you think going further down that pathway and kind of um, elaborating on that is the way to go, or if you think there's an additional thing that you think should be on folks' minds in that position, all ears.
Yeah, this is something that I always talk about. So most in-house SEOs stay in their lane, and I think that's a huge mistake. So when I started in SEO was really, really important, and executives cared about it, and it seemed magical, and they paid a lot of respect for SEO. And the longer I stayed in SEO, the less respect executives had for SEO, and you can see that in organizational hierarchy. So the SEO team reports lower and lower on the totem pole, and many times executives don't even know who's on the SEO team. There's like exceptions, like massive companies with exceptions where like the SEOs are obsessed with the executives are obsessed with SEO, but in most cases, that's not the case. What that means is that the career paths for SEO teams gets very limited because you don't have that executive visibility. You don't have a seat at the table. So don't stay in your lane. If you want to get promoted, don't stay in your lane. Do things that get more attention. So as an example, and I've shared this a bunch of times, and now the information's kind of old. When I was at SurveyMonkey, and I did not have this problem because I joined when I was early enough, and I had executive visibility, and I met with the CEO, once a quarter, and I had to show my plans. But the team later on, after I left, they were like far demoted down the organizational hierarchy, whereas I was a director and I reported to CMO, who reported to CEO or COO or something. By the time I left, the SEO team was reporting to a director of growth, who reported to senior director of marketing, or reported like very far down the totem pole. But one of the things I did when sorry, I have a tsunami.
I was gonna say, is it a person or is it a weather event? That's
No, earthquake.
oh, are you feeling it?
No,
Okay.
no, nothing shaking. It said tsunami warning, and I was like, okay, I'm good. No tsunamis here because I'm
Yeah.
far inland, but that's an earthquake. But
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I did not feel it. Um,
Okay.
Here, I could always tell my coffee's not shaking.
Right. It's the signs test.
Yes. Although maybe Google gave me an advance notice and or it's gonna about to shake.
Right.
All right, going back to that. So when I was at SurveyMonkey, we had issues with our SEO, and I was getting heat for those issues. And one of the reasons that it seemed like there was issues is because of our attribution model. So our traffic was up, our rankings were up, but the revenue was declining. So I was getting heat for that. So what I did was I had the data team model out what first click would have looked like. And it turned out that first click was even better than it had ever been. And first click was two-thirds of all global revenue, which at the time amounted to $200 million. So obviously, I and my team were not responsible for $200 million, but I started using that $200 million in all conversations. So
Right.
in executive updates, in conversations with leadership, in conversations with the finance team, I always pointed to the first click attribution of the $200 million. Well, magically, all of my requests for budget were always approved because, again, everyone knew that I wasn't directly responsible solely for $200 million, but I played a very strong role in that $200 million. So that's what I would say to any in-house SEO, which is don't stay in your lane. Don't focus only on what your manager asked you to do. Find other ways to get visibility, whether this is how you contributed to a brand campaign with your brand SEO. This is how you contributed to the successful earnings report. This is how you contributed to a logo that you got from a backlink. Some of those backlinks are on logos. So don't stay in your
Right.
lane.
Right. That's such good advice. And I think it comes from don't let other people decide for you. Don't let conversations and narratives happen that are about you without your participation in them. And I think that's a lot of what you're saying, where you're like, hey, I was getting flack for something that, but so I'm going to write the rule. And I'm going to say, well, what if we're doing it this other way? Would I actually be getting credit? And then just having the courage to say it, and then just also knowing the logistics of, you just repeat it always. People need to hear it over and over again, and then it'll become true. We did a webinar last year, and it was right after, I think, or it was right after we had the first real big update around AI, and ChatGPT came out, and everybody was like, how do we get into this thing? How do we, what is it? And we were like, here's all of our findings that we've had so far. And it was real sky is falling. I remember Derek Awaziak, our chief SEO officer, he put a slide up that was like, I think it was like Who's the egg? Is that Humpty Dumpty, the egg that's on the top of the castle? So yeah, it was like Humpty
Yeah.
Dumpty, and he's like, "Is the sky actually falling this time, or is it just like every other time?" And our message at the end of that was, "Hey, you have an opportunity to if you're in-house, to redefine your role and your territory and expand it to become the go-to person in this area that all of a sudden everybody wants to know about and everybody needs to know. And you have a justifiable reason, whether it's, first click attribution, or whether it's, hey, there's an algorithm running this thing that's really similar to the algorithm running my thing, and you have an opportunity to basically expand the conversation about yourself beyond, as you're saying, your role, what others are telling you to do. So I think people should take that all of the time and use it at every opportunity possible, because that is the thing that's going to actually be able to generate good results for them, and that is the thing that allows them to get more responsibility, more visibility, all those sorts of things that you're describing that are so important.
Totally. And what I would add is that right now the sky may not be falling, but it benefits to warn everyone that the sky will eventually fall and you will be the one to save it.
Right.
Because it can be frustrating right now when you're in a meeting and you present some sort of plan and the CEO is like, yeah, but cool, ChatGPT can do that. And that is frustrating. But in the year from now, or 6 months from now, hopefully, when a lot of big sites don't have the same traffic anymore, and you did not do the wrong thing, and you have a chance to say, I told you so, and then your job is more secure and you get a raise and you get a bonus and all that
Right.
stuff, do it. Hold on for that moment, because that moment is coming.
You get to be like, can you imagine that you almost got your ass fired as an executive at this company because you thought it was a good idea to have a robot in charge of what our brand speaks and have that be the guiding factor. So it's also just about how you can word things in a way that are going to elicit a response to somebody. And I think it's advocating. It's advocating for self. It's advocating internally with clients, as vendors, and it's advocating as a manager and leader. What we're talking about, which is just, there's only so much attention, there's only so much time, and at the end of the day, you will only be asked, "Did the job get done? Yes or no?" And if your answer is yes, no one will care what happened in order to do it. And if the job was no, no, and if the answer is no, no one will care what the excuse was why it didn't happen. That's just the reality of what we live in.
Absolutely. And I love that you pointed out that the having robots speak for your brand, because there are so many cases already where the robots have said the wrong thing. There was even I read about this recently, and I know there's been bigger cases, but an Air Canada customer talked to an AI chatbot and asked an AI chatbot a question, and the AI chatbot gave the wrong answer. And then it might have been like at a refund fee or whatever it was. And then Air Canada didn't honor it. And for whatever reason, the customer sued Air Canada. And again, this is Air Canada being stupid.
Right.
Instead of just paying whatever they had to pay, like, oh, here's your refund, they went to court and they tried to defend it. And they lost because the AI chatbot spoke for Air Canada. So this is going to be more and more of it. So like, if a robot, like, is a robot speaking for you, a robot's writing the content, and is that what we want? And yet, like, you can proofread content, you can have human element, but when you're writing 100,000 pieces of content, I think that conversation is lost.
Right. So we look forward to the destruction that will ensue, that many people have been secretly waiting for over the next 6 to 12 years, and going back to really rewarding human energy and expertise, and ushering us into an era that we would call the human era of SEO, or of, commerce, whatever it is, which is ironic because it is an area that will be 99.99% content generated by an AI. It just won't be the content that's rewarded.
Yes, and just before anyone says like we're protectionists and we're trying to save our useless jobs, because I've heard that before from people when I say these things about AI. I'm not. I don't want content to get destroyed on Google because I want to save my SEO job and I want to save the SEO industry. I'm speaking from a user angle of the users are going to hate this. Like, when right now, we use credit cards as an example. When a user goes to do a search to find the right credit card and it's all AI nonsense. And if you want any proof that this is what users want, just look at what the most popular keyword that anyone's appending to searches are, which is what?
If I had to guess, I would say human.
Reddit, right?
Okay. Oh, right. Okay.
So when
Right.
people
Yeah.
append the word Reddit, they're basically saying,
Right.
I don't want any of that
Right.
SEO crap. I
They want
want to see what
human.
real humans are saying. I want a new credit card. I want to know if, Wells Fargo is a good bank. I want to know if Air Canada has a refund policy. I don't want to see, the latest AI summary of Air Canada's refund policy. I want to hear what people that flew on Air Canada said in the Air
Right.
Canada subreddit, and I want to see what they said in the last 3 months. So
That's
I
so
think
true.
I think if there's any proof that that's what users want, then either Google basically cedes itself to Reddit, which I think Reddit has terrible search, and I think there's not great quality in the Reddit content, or Google has to reject all this content on behalf of users and make search results what people want.
Well said. Eli, an absolutely fantastic conversation. Thank you so much for your time and coming on. Where can the people get in touch with you and find you?
So subscribe to my newsletter, productledseo.com, which is where I write these things. It is not AI written. I use AI to help me because why wouldn't I? It's smart and useful, but it is my own thoughts. And subscribe, follow me on LinkedIn, and buy my book or read my book. I don't care if you buy it because I don't make any money off it, but read my book if you have not.
If you can scrape together the 99 cents, you too can be a proud owner of product led SEO. No reason not to do it. Eli, thank you so much for your time today. And thanks everybody out there watching this live and on their own time.
Thanks for having me.